What's going on, guys? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Around the Clock. Today I'm going to provide a status update on the 997 C4S, and I'm also going to reveal the replacement car. Welcome to Around the Clock. My name is John, and my personal goal is to own, experience, and modify as many unique cars as possible. Alright guys, once again, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Around the Clock. For those who are new to the channel, my name is John, and my personal goal is to own, experience, and modify as many unique cars as possible. To pick up from the last episode, we were preparing my 997 C4S for the new owner. And all I wanted to do is kind of provide you a status update as to where we are with that, and more importantly, the next experience. So from the last video, we were preparing the car, we gave it a nice hand wash, vacuumed it, and we also installed like a new iPhone cable for the new owner's new car. And then pretty much the car sat until I received the remaining balance of the car, but also waiting for transportation to come pick it up. But all that has happened. It happened last week. The car actually got to the new owner the same day. It was picked up around noon. An enclosed trailer came to pick it up, and I think the new owner received it around 2 a.m. And we were texting back and forth. I know he was super excited to be getting the car, and he's been extremely happy with it so far. And if you want to follow my 997 C4S, I will put his Instagram right here. Feel free to give him a follow. He's a huge car guy. He'll be taking it out to events in his area, and you can kind of follow the build and see what he has in plan for it. I know he had actually ordered some parts before he even received the car. So the gentleman who has it, we're very similar in a sense where we enjoy the modifying process and just like to make things stand out. The difference between him and I is he does like more performance and then aesthetics. I'm more of an aesthetics guy. Performance is kind of like, it really depends on the platform and the situation. Now we are going to jump into the replacement car. So for those who don't know, prior to buying the 997 C4S, I was between two other cars. It was a very aggressively modified NSX, which someone locally purchased. Very good looking car. It was a bit too purpose-built for me, just because, I only have one project car, one car to kind of tinker with. So sometimes there are cars that look like race cars, but they still have creature features and, things that you would want from a car that you're using, on a nice day. I personally like to listen to music. The car didn't have a radio, and there were just things that ended up not working out. But another thing that I was considering is a Gen 2 Bentley GT. And for those who don't know, I used to own a Gen 1 Bentley GT. It was a 2008 black on black. It had the Mulliner package, the W12 engine, twin turbo, and it was a pretty solid car. I bought it from a dealership in Atlanta called Atlanta Autos, and ended up purchasing the car sight unseen and had it delivered to my house. And I will say that it is a very solid grand touring car, because sometimes people will ask, how does the 911 compare to the Bentley GT? And it really doesn't, right? Because they're two completely different cars. Like the 911 is a nice balance between, sport, luxury, but it is considered more of a sports car. The Bentley GT is more of a grand touring car. And the difference between the two, in my opinion, is grand touring cars are more built for comfort and luxury, right? If you go on a grand tour, you can be in something that is nice, but also more comfortable. It'll still have a sporty aspect to it, but it's more built around comfort and kind of luxury. So just a prime example, I've owned a couple Maserati Gran Turismos, and while I'm not a huge fan of Maseratis really, I do like the Gran Turismo. I've actually had, you know, a couple of them. I had an MC and then I had a GT, but how you can tell that car, a GT car, is, I mean, aesthetically, I think it's a good looking car. I like the long front end and the short kind of rear. The inside is very comfortable, and the car has 6 cup holders, but it's not slow. One I had a 4.7 liter naturally aspirated V8. I believe it's a Ferrari derived motor, but it sounds phenomenal. And while it's not the fastest thing in the world, it's comfortable. You know, it feels pretty nice on the inside. I will say some of the tech is a bit dated, but overall it's a nice quality built car. It still has a little bit of a sportiness aspect to it. So as many of you know, for me, I don't care too much about performance or driving fast, right? Like, I just like to keep my cars clean. I like to add aesthetic modifications to kind of make it stand apart. And I just like to cruise. You know, like for me, I like attending cars and coffee type gatherings versus a rally. That's just my preference. And another big thing for me is usability, right? Like a car that I can kind of get in, whether it be with my family or if we're going out to dinner with friends, you know, something that could be an option if we wanted to take it out. It's something we could drive. Without further ado, there's some people that follow me on social media and I've already made posts about it, but for those who don't, the car that I replaced my 2007 997 C4S with is a 2013 Bentley GT V8. So to kind of go into the details and how this happened, it's pretty cool in my opinion. I think how it unfolded was great. So once I received a deposit for the 997 C4S, you know, I was in the market for the next car, and I knew it was going to be a Bentley GT just because, you know, I couldn't stop thinking about the car and I really wanted to experience it. I started my search for a Gen 2 Bentley GT. So for those who aren't familiar with Bentleys, I believe the Gen 2 runs from 2012 to 2017. And the reason why I wanted to experience it is, one, I had a great experience with my first gen. Also, the second gen has a facelift, right? Because, you know, aesthetics are very important to me. And the Gen 2s look a lot more modern. If you look at the front end of a Gen 2 versus Gen 1, headlights, for example, the Gen 1, though it may not look like it, one of the headlights are slightly bigger than the other. In the second gen, it is a lot easier to distinguish, you know, the size of the headlights. The ones on the outer part of the car are smaller and the ones on the closer to the grille are larger, and they have LEDs built into them for like daytime running light. Also, the body lines are slightly different. The taillights are slightly different, but the biggest thing is the interior feels a lot more modern. You know, in the Gen 1, the first things that I noticed is like the steering wheel. The steering wheel on a Gen 1 standard Bentley GT, I'm not talking about a GT Speed or a SS or Super Sport. The steering wheel looks like a Volkswagen Touareg or any kind of standard Volkswagen steering wheel. It's not very sporty looking. Versus the Gen 2, the steering wheel looks more modern. Also, if you look at the infotainment system, Gen 1, it's just kind of dated. You know, it does have a screen that's not really touch screen, but there are buttons along the side of it, versus the Gen 2s and look a little more modern. So for me, finding the right spec GT was a lot more challenging than I thought. And the reason why is because when you're shopping around for Bentleys, there are so many different options that you can choose, right? Like the people that are normally buying these cars, you know, sometimes they have eclectic taste, right? Color combinations that are very unique. You might find, you know, a Bentley GT that has a really nice looking exterior color that you like, but you look on the inside and it's either like a white or a cream. It's very rich looking, but for me, I have 2 young kids and I know that they would ruin it. Just thinking about it gives me anxiety. You know, if you wear blue jeans and they're wet, you know, just thinking about how it could stain the leather and things like that. For me, I wanted a spec that was a little more conservative. First Bentley GT was black on black, or they call it beluga. So this one that I found and purchased was beluga on beluga, which is black on black. And it also has the contrast stitching, white stitching all along, the dash, and certain panels on the car have the contrast stitching. How it worked is I was on several different places. I looked on Marketplace, I looked on eBay, I looked on Auto Trader, Car Gurus, and I think the one I ended up finding was on Auto Trader. And it was a private owner car, but the only issue is it was on the other side of the country. So I'm here in Maryland, this car was in Cali. And when you're dealing with private owners, it's a little challenging, right? Like my first gen Bentley GT, I bought it from a dealership. You know, obviously you have a storefront, things like that. So if you were to do a wire, it's a little, you know, the risk is lower versus private owner or somebody that you don't know versus a business that's established. I reached out to the owner, talked to him. He was very nice, very responsive. But the biggest challenge is for me is how am I going to go see this car in person to ensure that, you know, it's as advertised, right? Sometimes things look great in ads, but when you see it in person, there may be things that, you know, you don't like or whatever it may be. So what I did was I was talking to my friend Javon. He actually purchased the silver 911 that I used to own, and he is on the West Coast. So just in conversation, I had reached out to him and I asked how far he was from the city where this Bentley GT was. And he goes, oh, you know, it's about 30 minutes, assuming that there's no traffic. If there's traffic, it could be, you know, double that. So I said, you know, pay you, is there any way you can go look at the car for me? So absolutely. And Saturday, he went out, he met up with the owner around 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and he looked over the car for me. We FaceTimed, sent me videos, he drove the car. And like I said, thankfully the seller was receptive to it. Sometimes people are really weird about that, and unfortunately we're living in a day where a lot of elaborate scams that people come up with. Thankfully, he you know, was receptive to the idea and actually was able to meet Javon closer than we initially had discussed. After Javon took a look at the car, he gave me the green light, and at that point I went ahead and sent a deposit, and then I ended up doing a wire for the remaining balance a couple days later. The car is paid for, and it was just picked up from transportation in an enclosed trailer yesterday, so it will probably be about 5 to 6 days before I see it here on the East Coast. But I at least wanted to share with you what the new car is. Also, if you follow my social media, you'll see this as well. But one of the things I've always wanted to do is put TE37s on a Bentley GT. The only one that I've ever seen was a Gen 3. It was a black Bentley GT with a set of black TE37s on it. And it looked amazing. I absolutely loved it. The only other one that I've seen, I believe, was a white Gen 3, and it had bronze TEs, but I believe that was like Photoshop. It wasn't like an actual car set up like that. You know, many of you know I like really unique cars, and the Bentley isn't a platform that a lot of people modify, and I also like JDM cars. So JDM, for those who aren't familiar with that, that stands for Japanese Domestic Market. Vehicles that were only sold in Japan, not really, you know, to the US. And for being somebody that likes unique things, I think JDM cars are naturally unique because they were never sold here in the US. So when you do see something right-hand drive or something that was only made in Japan, it's pretty cool and unique. So no matter what I have, I always like to add, you know, kind of a combination of the two. Like the last 997C for us had a set of Japanese Workmeister S1 wheels. So my next obstacle was trying to find the right wheel specs for the Bentley. And at the time, I had a hard time kind of finding specs for what I would want for that specific application. I haven't seen any Gen 2s on TE37s before. And the things that I had to consider is, well, one, the Bentley GT is a very big platform, right? It's a big body car. And I feel like 21s would probably fit the car better as long as it's well executed. You know, as long as you lower it and things like that, I think it can look really good. But unfortunately with Volk TE37s, the largest that I've seen them is a 20-inch. And I didn't want to buy a car, you know, the wheels don't fit. No one's really done it, so it's kind of hard to find the specs. But I am part of a Bentley owners group, and I had put out an inquiry regarding wheel fitment. There was one gentleman, his name was Andy. Huge thank you to Andy for all the help and support. But he had a very good looking white Gen 2 Bentley GT that was lowered on some aftermarket wheels, and the stance is perfect. It's actually exactly what I'm looking for. And you know, you can always be a little more conservative with your wheel specs. You can always add a spacer. I know people have their reservations about spacers, and that's fine, that's understandable, but ultimately, I would rather a car be slightly too conservative versus too aggressive, because it's a difference between the wheels working with the car and not. And after talking to him, his specs were actually slightly more aggressive than the ones that I ended up going with. I ended up finding out spec was available because I knew I wanted to do TE37s on a Bentley GT. So my decision, the Bentley that I went with, was based off of what TE37s were available in the specs that I needed. And it ended up working out perfectly because the Bentley GT that I bought was black on black, which I think will appeal to more people than not. And then I went with bronze TEs, T37 Ultras. I ended up reaching out to Will Wong with AR Motorworks. For those who aren't familiar with them, they do amazing work and build custom, primarily BBSs, whether it be, LMs, LMRs, RSGTs, whatever it is. They're very well known for doing that. And I had reached out to him just because I knew him and asked if he could get TEs, and he said yes. And he actually, gave me the spec that was needed. What's really cool about it is obviously the car's on the West Coast and AR is on the West Coast. Once he confirmed that the TEs were available in the spec that I needed, he actually delivered them to the gentleman's house where the car was. So when the car got picked up yesterday, the wheels were also loaded onto the trailer as well. So right now, at this point, I'm just kind of waiting for the car to arrive. And when it does come, I will do a video of it being unloaded, and I'll kind of do a walk around the car, go over the specs of it. And also at that time, I'll go over all the modifications that I have planned for it. Believe it or not, when I physically paid for the car, at that point, I started ordering all the parts and things I wanted for the car. So, I'll go over what the plans are, what we have here, so we can start working on it right away. I'm super, super excited for this experience and this project and sharing it with you all. So that's pretty much it for today's video. I know there's a lot of talking, but I hope that you guys are excited as much as I am. I'm just very excited to do something different that no one's really done before, and just excited to see how well it turns out. So hope you guys enjoyed the content. If you do, consider liking and subscribing. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next video.